Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, grab a seat, maybe a cold drink, because today we're going to take a trip back in time. Things have been a little heavy in the memories department, so I wanted to remember something happy today. We're going back to an era of unbridled rock and roll, questionable fashion choices, and the absolute chaos that was my very first concert. We all have that one story, right? The rite of passage. The moment you cross the threshold from listening to a scratched vinyl record to standing in a sea of sweating, screaming humanity while a wall of amplifiers rearranges your internal organs. A first concert isn't just an event, it's a milestone. And mine was a masterclass in high anxiety, extreme temperatures, and amateur contraband smuggling. The year was, let's just say it was back when Van Halen was still young, wildly cool, and strictly known for throwing the ultimate party and melting faces with guitar solos. We had tickets to see them in San Bernardino, California. Now, if you know anything about the inland empire of Southern California in the summer, you know it's less of a city and more of a solar oven. Let me set the cast of characters for you. There was me, practically vibrating out of my sneakers with anticipation. There was my boyfriend Alan, equally hyped and ready to witness rock history. And then there was Ross. Ross was Alan's brother-in-law. He was a little older, supposedly a little wiser, and definitely the guy who was supposed to be showing us the ropes of rock and roll lifestyle. We had been looking forward to this night for weeks. We had counted down the days, saved up our cash, and spent hours listening to 8 tracks in preparation. The journey to San Bernardino was a blur of open windows, hot wind, and maximum volume rock. But the real story begins when we actually pulled up to the venue. This wasn't your modern, corporate-sponsored, air-conditioned arena with luxury seating and craft beer stands. Oh no. The promoters, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to hold this massive rock concert in an old, repurposed airplane hangar. And I don't mean a hangar for little Cessna prop planes. I'm talking about a cavernous, corrugated metal behemoth designed to house massive multi-engine aircraft. Walking into this place was like walking into the belly of a mechanical beast. The walls were uninsulated sheet metal. The roof was basically a giant magnifying glass for the California sun that had been beating down all day on it. There was no air conditioning. There wasn't even a breeze, just a stagnant, sweltering heavy heat. It was hot as hell. Honestly, hell might have had a better breeze. Within 30 seconds of stepping through the giant sliding doors, every single person in that building was drenched in sweat. It smelled like wet denim, cheap leather, patchouli oil, and teenage rebellion. It was absolutely perfect. We staked out our general trajectory and realized we had some time before the opening act. Now, as the older, more experienced member of the trio, Ross had taken it upon himself to supply the party favors for the evening. Specifically, he had rolled a few joints, which were the undisputed currency of late 70s rock concerts. "All right, guys," Ross said, leaning in like he was giving us the nuclear launch codes. "I'm going to hit the head, get the supplies ready, and then we head to our spot." He patted the front pocket of his jeans with a knowing, confident smirk. He had slipped the joints into his pocket right before we walked past the ticket takers, a classic smuggler's move. Clean, simple, foolproof. Or so we thought. Alan and I stood near a pillar watching the crowd file in. The energy was electric. People were tossing frisbees over the crowd, girls were riding on guys' shoulders, and the faint, chaotic hum of guitar tuning was echoing from the stage hidden behind a massive black curtain. We were in heaven! 10 minutes passed, then 15. "What's taking him so long?" Alan asked, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "You think he got busted?" "No way," I said, though a pit was starting to form in my stomach. "It's Ross. He knows what he's doing." Just as I said that, the bathroom doors swung open and Ross emerged. Now, I need you to picture this. the hangar is probably 110 degrees inside. Everyone is flushed, red-faced, and sweating profusely. But Ross's face was the color of a freshly bleached bedsheet. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, and the ghost had told him his dog died. He was completely, utterly white. He didn't walk over to us. He sort of glided, moving with this stiff, terrifying rigidity like his knees had suddenly been fused together. Alan and I rushed over to him. "Ross, man, what's wrong? Are you sick? Did you throw up?" Ross grabbed my shoulder, his eyes wide and frantic, darting around the crowd to make sure no security guards were within earshot. He leaned in, his voice a strained, panicked whisper. "We have a situation," he rasped. "What? What happened to the stuff?" Alan asked. Ross squeezed his eyes shut in pure agony. "I went into the stall to pull them out. I reached into my pocket, and my fingers kept going." I stared at him, not comprehending. "What do you mean they kept going?" "There's a hole in my pocket," Ross hissed, his panic fully bubbling over now. "A giant blown-out hole at the bottom of the lining." Alan and I looked at each other, the reality of the situation slowly dawning on us. "Okay," I said slowly. "So, where are they?" Ross looked down at his right leg with a mixture of disgust and sheer terror. "They're in my pants. They fell through the pocket. They are currently somewhere between my crotch and my ankle, just free-floating inside my pant leg." I want you to pause and visualize the physics of this disaster. We are in a crowded, hyper-vigilant environment where dropping illegal contraband on the floor is a one-way ticket to the back of a police cruiser. Ross is wearing the standard issue pants of the era, fitted at the top, slightly flared at the bottom. The joints are trapped in the fabric no man's land, migrating southward with gravity in every single movement he makes. "You can't just reach in and grab them?" Alan asked, stating the obvious. "We're in the middle of 10,000 people," Ross whisper yelled. "I can't just drop my pants and go digging around my calves in the middle of a Van Halen concert." He was right. We were paralyzed. Okay. What's the plan?" I asked, trying to take charge. "The plan," Ross said grimly, "is that we walk to our spot. But I can't walk normally. If I take a full stride, the fabric pulls tight, and they might pop out the bottom of my pant leg onto the floor." "So how are you going to walk?" Alan asked. Ross demonstrated. He took a step with his left foot, and then, dragging his right leg, he did this aggressive, spasmodic shake. It looked like he was trying to aggressively kick a piece of toilet paper off his shoe, mixed with a really poorly executed salsa move. "Step, shake, shake, kick. Step, shake, shake, kick." "I have to shake my leg," Ross explained, his face still pale but now glistening with stress sweat. "I have to shake it to keep them resting on the fabric around my calf. If they drop lower, they hit the flare of the pants and we lose them." And so began the most stressful, hilarious, and bizarre procession of my entire young life. The three of us formed a tactical formation. Ross was in the center, performing his erratic, jerky St. Vitus's dance through the crowd. I was on his right side and Alan was on his left. Our job? We were the Joint Retrieval Task Force. "Keep your eyes on the floor," Ross commanded as we began to move. "If you see a little white cylinder hit the concrete, you dive on it like it's a live grenade. Understand?" "Got it," we both said in unison. Navigating that airplane hangar was already a challenge. It was packed shoulder to shoulder. Now imagine trying to navigate that crowd while your buddy is doing an aggressive one-legged hokey pokey, and you and your other friend are walking completely hunched over, staring intently at the dirty concrete floor around his right ankle. We looked insane. We looked like we had lost a very small, very valuable contact lens, and we were willing to trample anyone to find it. "Excuse us," I kept saying, pushing past a group of older rockers. "Pardon me. Just watching the floor. Yep, watch those shoes." "How we doing, Ross?" Alan would whisper every 10 feet. "They're at the knee," Ross would grit out through clenched teeth. "Step, shake, shake, kick." "Wait, no, the right one just slid down. It's at mid-calf. Keep your eyes peeled." Every time someone bumped into Ross, he would let out a tiny yelp of terror, freezing in place and doing a frantic little shimmy to readjust the cargo trapped in his denim elevator. At one point, a guy with a massive afro and a tie-dye shirt stumbled backwards and stepped squarely on Ross's left foot. Ross couldn't put his weight on his right leg without risking the drop, so he just sort of tipped backward, windmilling his arms to keep balance while Alan and I simultaneously dove toward his right boot, hands outstretched, ready to catch the falling prize. The tie-dye guy looked at us like we were absolute lunatics. "Whoa, man, bad trip?" he asked, holding up his hands. "No," Ross wheezed, righting himself. "Just sciatica. Acts up in the heat." "Righteous," the guy said, wandering off into the crowd. We must have walked for 20 minutes. A journey that should have taken 2 minutes turned into an agonizing slow-motion escort mission. At one point, one of the joints dropped to the ground and Alan and I nearly knocked heads in our rush to grab it. My neck was cramping from staring at the floor. Alan had almost been stepped on 3 times. And Ross, he was so sweaty he looked like he had run a marathon. Finally, by some miracle of the rock gods, we found a pocket of open space near a massive concrete support pillar, giving us a decent view of the stage and, more importantly, a tiny modicum of privacy. "Form a perimeter," Ross ordered, panting heavily. Alan and I stood shoulder to shoulder, facing outward, creating a human shield. Ross backed up against the cold concrete pillar. "I'm going in," he announced. I glanced over my shoulder. Ross had hiked his pant leg up over his cowboy boot, reaching down deep into the dark recesses of his jeans. It was a tense 3 seconds. It felt like defusing a bomb. And then a triumphant sigh. "Got him," Ross whispered, pulling his hand out. Resting in his sweaty, trembling palm were the slightly squished but totally intact joints. Alan and I nearly cheered. We patted him on the back like he had just scored the winning touchdown in a Super Bowl. The color finally started to return to Ross's face. He leaned back against the pillar, sliding down to a crouch, completely exhausted from the sheer adrenaline dump. "I am never," Ross breathed, "and I mean never wearing these pants again." And just as he said that, the house lights in the giant airplane hangar snapped off. The crowd erupted into a deafening primal roar. It was a sound so loud you didn't just hear it, you felt it vibrating in your teeth. The heat in the room somehow seemed to spike another 10 degrees just from the collective body heat of 10,000 people surging forward. Suddenly, the stage lights exploded with blinding white light, and there they were. Eddie Van Halen welding his legendary Frankenstrat like a wizard, while David Lee Roth leaped off the drum riser doing a full mid-air split. Eddie hit one power chord, and the sheer volume of the amplifiers physically pushed the air out of my lungs. It was absolute beautiful madness. For the next 2 hours, we forgot about the heat. We forgot about the cramped conditions. We definitely forgot about the harrowing, terrifying journey of the contraband down Ross's pant leg. We were just 3 people lost in the thunderous, face-melting reality of a legendary rock concert. The music echoed off the corrugated metal ceiling, turning the entire hangar into a massive, vibrating speaker box. The energy was infectious. Even Ross, who had been on the verge of a nervous breakdown 30 minutes prior, was screaming the lyrics, his fist pumping in the air, a massive grin plastered on his face. We walked out of that hangar hours later, our ears ringing so loudly it sounded like we had a swarm of cicadas trapped in our heads. Our clothes were literally heavy with sweat. My voice was completely gone from screaming. We were exhausted, dehydrated, and smelled terrible. And it was, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the greatest nights of my life. Looking back on it now, it's exactly what a first concert should be. It shouldn't be perfect. It shouldn't go exactly according to plan. It should be a little chaotic, a little overwhelming, and deeply memorable. Because let's be honest, if everything had gone smoothly, if Ross's pockets had been fully intact and we had just walked to our spots like normal people, it would have just been a good concert. But because of a cheap pair of jeans and a blowout in a pocket lining, it became a legendary story. It became the night of the great joint escort mission. It was a great night. For a change, the universe threw us a curveball and we managed to catch it right before it hit the floor of an airplane hangar in San Bernardino. I'll never forget the roar of that crowd, the blistering heat of that metal building, or the sight of Alan's brother-in-law doing a frantic one-legged salsa dance while Alan and I inspected the floor like a bomb squad. That's the magic of rock and roll, man. It's the music, sure, but it's also the adventures you have with the people you drag along for the ride.